Okay.
What's your reaction to the obstruction of Congress charge from the?
I think it's a dangerous charge against the presidency as an institution. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But the reason I came is I want to echo what Mr. Schiff said today, Manager Schiff. I want every American to put themselves in the shoes of the Bidens. You're the Vice President of the United States. You're in charge of Ukrainian corruption efforts, and your son winds up getting $3 million from the most corrupt entity in the Ukraine, Burisma. Would you expect people to give you a pass? To the average American, the first payment he got from Burisma, Hunter Biden, was $87,000. Do you expect anybody to ask questions about that? Here's what I can say. If the shoe were on the other foot, and this was Liz Cheney or Pence's son doing this in the Ukraine, Adam Schiff would be leading the charge for an investigation of what happened, because it is bad government. It is a clear conflict of interest. It undermines any effort to bring better government to the Ukraine and to combat corruption. How do you think the Ukrainians take this when they hear that the vice president's son is getting $3 million from the most corrupt company in the Ukraine? It kind of undercuts that narrative. I think it's bad foreign policy. And here's my point. I supported Mueller looking into all things Trump because I believe the country needed to have somebody outside politics to resolve the allegations against the president. Here's what is stunning to me, that the impeachment managers are telling the United States Senate and the country as a whole the Biden allegations have been investigated. That is a flat untruth. Nobody has done an investigation anywhere near like the Mueller investigation of the Bidens, and I think they should. And when this is over, the Congress will do it if we can't have an outside entity do it. I think it's very important to find out what happened, why the prosecutor was fired, how the system could let this go unchallenged, how the Secretary of State's stepson could be on the payroll of this company. So the bottom line here is we cannot have an America where only one side is looked at. To my Democratic friends, I stood with you when you called for an outside entity to look at President Trump. I am now asking you to allow somebody outside of politics to look at what happened with the Bidens and with John Kerry's stepson and others when it comes to the Ukraine, because we're not going to live in a country where only Republicans get looked at. So here's what I am saying. At home, put yourself in the shoes and see what would happen to you if you did this. And if you're a Republican, please understand Mr. Schiff would not be so kindly towards you.
What did you think of the McCain clip?
I agree with John McCain that Ukraine is important. Here's what people don't get. Donald Trump said that the world order that was so glowingly talked about by Mr. Schiff has not served us well. He believes that people have been riding on the coattails of America in terms of we're doing too much, they should do more. And he doesn't buy the idea that 10% of the Ukrainian military budget should come from the American taxpayer. I actually do think it's a good investment. And here's the good news. We're bringing Donald Trump along with the idea that alliances need to be improved, not destroyed. That NATO is better off when they contribute more. But this is a world clash. All the foreign policy experts, you don't understand that in Donald Trump's world, what we're doing in the Ukraine needs to be reassessed. And why doesn't France and Germany do more? You may not agree with that, but that is his view. And what John McCain said is what Lindsey Graham believes. I believe it's in a vital national interest to stand with Ukraine, but it's also okay to ask questions about the business dealings of the Ukraine. The new president seems to be a good guy, but one of the guys he wanted to put in charge of his cabinet was a lawyer for one of the most corrupt oligarchs in the Ukraine. So I like President Zelensky, but to say that we should accept everything that happened before President Trump in terms of foreign policy basically ignores why he got elected.
Senator Chuck Schumer came to the microphone. Chuck Schumer said that Republicans don't want to hear the true facts. Your response?
Well, here's what I would say. If you believe here's what I would say. they said, the House managers, there's no evidence, not one witness can tell us that Hunter Biden did anything wrong. When they tried to call Hunter Biden in the House, they said no. So I would say to Senator Schumer, this whole idea that the Bidens have been fairly investigated, if this were a Republican, you wouldn't be saying that. You would be going nuts. I was told by a reporter the Obama administration looked at this. Really, is that an adequate answer? Who in the Obama administration looked at it, and should I accept their word? So here's what I'd say about the truth. Here's the truth. They could have called people in the House close to the president. They chose not to, and they're dumping this in our lap. They should have looked more at what happened with the Bidens. They chose not to. The truth for me is the best thing to do is to end this trial with no witnesses for either side and have Congress do oversight regarding what happened in the Ukraine in a professional way, and I would prefer an outside counsel.
Senator, why did the lawyers, how would you present the defense after hearing everything?
Well, the first thing I would do is suggest that President Trump had no corrupt purpose, that he believes to this day that somebody should look at the Bidens, and so do I. And when 3 Democratic senators wrote a letter to the Ukraine asking them to cooperate with the Mueller investigation, I don't think they should be impeached. I think we need to set up a system to look at what the Bidens did as much outside of politics as possible. If I were the managers, I would go hard at the idea that the Biden investigation has been conducted, has been debunked, is bogus. If you can show a scintilla of evidence that there's a legitimate concern and questions should be asked, game, set, match in terms of their case. I would also suggest that President Trump's policies toward the Ukraine and Russia have been very aggressive compared to the other administration. There was no betrayal of the Ukrainian fighting forces. I would hit that pretty hard. And I would use the words of the other side as they use my words. I'm fair game. Talking about how they viewed executive privilege when there was a Democratic president involved. That's kind of what I would do, and I wouldn't take 24 hours.
Senator, why did Republicans look at the Bidens in 2016, 2017? The facts.
Honest to God, I didn't know anything about this. I haven't really been following it. I didn't know. One, I like Joe Biden. If people ask me, no, I don't think he's corrupt, but I think he has to answer for how he could allow his son to get himself and the country in this spot. I think those are fair questions. But a lot of this has come out when you start talking about the Ukraine. I gave Mueller the space to do all things Russia, but if you're going to bring up the Ukraine and Trump, how can you not bring up the Ukraine and Biden? You know, the president didn't say, I want all of my political opponents investigated. He is saying that when you talk about me in the Ukraine, how can you ignore the Bidens in the Ukraine? It is an obvious conflict of interest that I think compromises our national security and undercuts the narrative that we're serious about fighting corruption.
Is it similar to senators, their children having lobbying jobs? I mean, why is this different?
Well, I would say this. I would say that we have a responsibility up here to conduct ourselves honorably and to follow the law. But I would suggest that we probably have kids working in the private sector for lobbyists. I think that's a bit different than working for the most corrupt company in the Ukraine when you're giving the charge of trying to combat corruption. I think that is a bridge too far. And here's what I believe. If it were my son or my daughter, and if you're a Republican, y'all would be all over us. And I know you probably don't like me saying that, but Republicans believe more than ever that there's a two-tiered system in this country. And that's not fair. And I don't want people to believe that.
Do you want the Justice Department to look into the Biden?
I don't know. That's a good question. I want somebody. You know why I don't want to do it? I love Joe Biden. I don't want to do do this.
Are you looking to go maybe have like outside of the
somebody that can say, somebody can say, in December the 10th, when Hunter Biden went to the State Department after the New York Times reported that he was on the board of Burisma and it undercuts Joe Biden's credibility to be an anti-corruption guy, what did they talk about at the State Department? It may be just a conflict of interest. It may just be bad judgment. They may be no more to this. But I know from the time that the office of the president of Burisma was raided and the time the prosecutor was fired, and he may be corrupt as hell, it was about 6 weeks. And you need to look at what happened in that 6-week period. There may be innocent explanations, but I know this. You're not going to convince me or most people on my side that it has been investigated when it has not.
You've spoken pretty emotionally. You've spoken pretty emotionally about the Bo's impact, Bo's death, the impact that had on Biden. Do you think that shaded any?
Well, yeah, I know that Kent called the Biden folks and say, "Hey, this is not kosher," and the answer was that Joe is struggling. I get that, but at a point, you've got to sort of, I understand that, and that's why I don't want to do this. But there comes a point, this happened in 2014 and we're all the way to 2016, and to all the foreign policy advisors who've had concerns about what President Trump did, when they asked Dr. Hill, are you okay with what Hunter Biden did he do anything wrong? Not that I know, but she hadn't looked. See, I think you should be equally upset. I can understand being upset with some of the stuff, but how can you not be upset that the man in charge of anti-corruption efforts on part of the United States government, the Vice President of the United States, son is making the Ukraine an ATM machine from the most corrupt entities in the country? As a foreign policy person, that should upset you too. So the person to do this, I don't want it to be Lindsey Graham, because it will be hard for me, but if I have to, I will do it. Because I don't think I'm being mean to Joe to ask questions about what happened in the Ukraine, and if I would expect me to be asked if it was me.